Good morning, everyone. The Monterey County Planning Commission for June 22nd, 2015 is now in session. Would Commissioner Mendez lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Jackie, a roll call.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call. Commissioner Ambriz. Commissioner Deal. Here. Commissioner Duflock. Here. Commissioner Getzelman.
Here.
Commissioner Hurt. Here. Commissioner Mendez.
Here.
Commissioner Padilla.
Here.
Commissioner Roberts. Absent. Commissioner Rochester. Absent. Commissioner Vanderveer.
Here.
Chair Padilla, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a public comment. You can comment on anything that's not on the agenda. Does anyone wish to come forward and only anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, any agenda additions, deletions, or corrections?
Yes. On the dais today, you've received a packet of additional correspondence that was also emailed to the Planning Commissioners. You have received an additional correspondence for agenda item number 1 that was received this morning. And today at the hearing, you received 3 items for agenda item number 1.
Okay, thank you. Legal counsel.
Yeah, I'm seeing we received, there's an email here from Jacqueline Nickerson that has your stamp, also to Monterey County Planning Commission from Anna Setti, but there are 2 other items that don't appear to have your stamp on them, and could you tell us are those from you, or did somebody from the public drop those off, or what?
Those 2 items were submitted by the public this morning prior to the hearing.
So perhaps do they need to have your stamp on them then?
Yes, we have the original document.
One of them says, "Dear Monterey County Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission members, we are writing to express our concerns." Do you have that in the record?
Yes.
And also there's a chart. Is that coming from a member of the public? Because the origin of that isn't clear.
Yes, these 2 are from the public, from 2 separate people from the public.
Okay.
Yes, we have the original stamped here. Those are copies submitted by
That the public just provided. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any commissioner comments, requests, or referrals? Seeing none, there is no approval of the minutes. We don't have any. Now, before we go to the staff, I'd like to speak to the public. When it does come to public comments or testimony, we don't know how many are going to be speaking, so there might be some more people coming in. But the people that are in the audience right now, how many plan to speak today? Could I have a show of hands? Okay, I'm going to try to give you as much time as I can when you do speak. I don't see that many, so we'll go with the 3-minute limit. Unless we get to a higher number, they might have to cut it back up. I'm going to try to be fair to everyone. But please be aware that somebody else behind you wants to also speak. So when I say your time is up or almost up, please be conscious of that. And I will try to get everybody in. Now to the commissioners, does anyone need to leave early today? Because we have only 1 item on the agenda, so I don't know if anyone has any plans today. Sometimes they do, and I don't see any today. So I'll try to give as much time as I can to the public as I possibly can. And then when we get to that, okay, thank you. Staff, are you ready? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. My name is Craig Spencer with the Resource Management Agency Planning Division. Here with me is Jacqueline Anciano, on Resource Management Agency Manager. I'm here to present the medical marijuana regulations for your consideration and a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. To start with, I'd like to start with the status of the legal situation surrounding medical cannabis, starting with the federal law, moving into state law, and then our local regulations, because all of these influence our local regulations. So at the federal level, cannabis is illegal under the federal law, the Controlled Substance Act. Recognizing that many states throughout the country have begun to legalize cannabis in one way or another, the U.S. Department of Justice has issued a memo that outlines the priority for federal enforcement and the use of their resources. Their priorities include preventing distribution to minors, preventing revenue from going to gangs, cartels, or other organized crimes, preventing diversion to other states where marijuana is not legal, preventing trafficking of other illegal drugs using cannabis as a front for that activity, preventing violence and use of firearms associated with cannabis activity, preventing drug driving, and preventing growing on public lands and possession on federal property. In terms of the federal law expectation regarding regulations for cannabis, their expectation is that we adopt a strong and effective regulatory enforcement system that is adequate to address these federal enforcement priorities. More recently, in 2015, the state of California adopted the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, also known as MRSA or MMRSA. That establishes a state licensing program for medical marijuana. This is a movement towards a legalized system of medical cannabis in California. So the state of California would issue licenses for different types of activities for cannabis, and they would only issue a license to operators that have permission from the local government. That is what our ordinance really does, is give permission, and then in 2018, we believe the state will begin implementing their new state law and with regulations. What the state law really does is establish a chain of custody for cannabis. So the cultivation and manufacturing of cannabis then moves through a dispensary a distribution or transportation entity that is usually not associated with the cultivator or manufacturer. So there's third parties involved, and testing always is required batch testing of sorts for certification, for consumer protection. The testing entities cannot be associated with the other types of licenses. In order to implement the chain of custody protocols, there is a track and trace program that is being developed. That is so that all the products in the legalized medical cannabis industry can be traced back to its source, its cultivation source. So there'll be a record of the cultivation and the plants, where it came from, and manifests as it makes its way through the chain of custody. That is the system by which you could implement the federal enforcement priorities, by ensuring that the legalized medical cannabis does not get diverted. So on our local level, prior to July 7, 2015, we had no specific rules for medical cannabis or cannabis operations. On July 7, 2015, we adopted an inter-emergency ordinance that temporarily prohibited new collective and cooperative operations in the county while we worked on draft regulations. Since that time, we've been working on the draft regulations with an ad hoc committee of the Board of Supervisors and a number of staff and departments involved in the regulatory aspect of the draft ordinances. And many of them are here today, and you'll hear from them at the end of my presentation. The draft regulations that we've developed are twofold, really, but three, because we have inland and coastal zoning ordinances. And those would be the one-time discretionary review that requires a use permit or a coastal development permit for each type of operation in each case, commercial cannabis operation. And then each operator or business would have to have a business permit under Title VII, Chapter 7.90 that we're adding. Again, these these ordinances have been drafted so that they are at least as stringent as state law. They address those federal enforcement priorities I went over, that they minimize land use conflicts in the county, and they address environmental concerns and resource protection. So within the use permit and coastal development permit, Title 20 and 21, we have added, as a use allowed in certain zoning districts, medical cannabis operations of the license types that are established by the state. And in each case, those medical cannabis operations would require a use permit or coastal development permit for commercial operation. And you can see here with my little icons that dispensaries would be allowed in the commercial zonings. Cultivation would be allowed indoor within the industrial or farmland zone in existing structures established legally prior to the 1st of this year. Manufacturing would be allowed in industrial and heavy commercial, Moss Landing commercial zoning districts, with heavy industrial being the appropriate location for volatile manufacturing. Distribution and transportation would be allowed in industrial and heavy commercial zones, as well as testing. The use permit and coastal development permit, or I'm sorry, inland or coastal ordinance also establishes new chapters within the zoning code. So the uses allowed are added and they refer to this new chapter. The new chapter establishes regulations for the consideration of the use permits or coastal development permits in each case. It includes application requirements. It includes regulations that implement the state law, including the chain of custody and track and trace programs. There are regulations that address the federal enforcement priorities. There are regulations that address and protect environmental resources. There are findings required to approve use permits and coastal development permits for each cannabis application, and there are enforcement criteria within that chapter. Exempt from use permits and coastal development permits is the personal cultivation of marijuana of up to 100 square feet per property by a qualified patient or the primary caregiver. Those operations would require a ministerial permit pursuant to Chapter 7.95, which is added to the county code with our ordinances. That ministerial permit has some setback criteria and some fertilizer and storage requirements, as well as minor security requirements that would be an over-the-counter registration and approval. The Title VII, Chapter 7.90 Cannabis Business Permit is intended to run with the operator. It would be an annual permit. It would not run with the land like the use permit or coastal development permit would. It would run with the operator. It would be more focused on the ongoing operations of the cannabis activity. There would be background checks for owners, operators, and employees. There would be regular weights and measures inspections from the agricultural department. There would be inspections to ensure ongoing compliance with the coastal development permits and this permit and state law. And again, it would be an annual renewal process for that business permit. So that's a reflection of what we actually have in front of you. Now, we started this by developing a rough draft initially, and we conducted 3 public meetings, 2 in Salinas and 1 in Bradley. We received public comment. We had provided those comments to this commission at a workshop on March 30th. But in general, the comments were in favor of expanding what was in that initial draft regulation by removing the permit limits that existed at that time, expanding the zoning districts, allowing outdoor cultivation, allowing multiple operations on one property, having a path for compliance for existing operations, expanding the personal cultivation size limit, and there was some support for keeping the regulations that we had drafted at that time. Again, we presented that information to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission provided us feedback at that workshop. Some of the questions and information they provided for consideration included the need for a business license associated with the cannabis activity. We have extracted the business license from the medical marijuana regulations at this time, and it will be making its way through the public hearing process separately. There was a question about what is the difference from our regulations and state law. As I explained, the state law requires local governments to provide written permission before the state will issue licenses. So there is no direction on what local governments can do or should do within the state law. It provides the opportunity for local governments to ban, and it also provides local governments for the opportunity to develop regulations that would offer permissions in the way they see fit. So we have implemented the track and trace program and the chain of custody protocols and all the requirements of the state law in that manner. The one area we are more strict than state law is relative to the personal cultivation. Personal cultivation under the state law would be exempt 100 square feet per qualified patient, or a primary caregiver growing on behalf of up to 5 qualified patients that would be 500 square feet is exempt from a state licensing. And within our ordinance, we're limiting the personal cultivation to 100 square feet. The reasoning there is that we are providing a situation where we're minimizing the impacts that we expect to occur with the heavy regulations applicable to the commercial cannabis industry, that there will be a push towards more of the personal growing, smaller collective model with the primary caregiver operation, and that we still want to provide the opportunity for a qualified patient to grow up to 100 square feet for their own personal cultivation. So we've left that to be exempt from use permits and coastal development permit ordinances. There was a question whether or not the general plan, whether or not the regulations were consistent with the general plan, and whether or not the right to farm ordinance applied to our regulations. We have done an analysis of the consistency with the general plan. The general plan didn't specifically address cannabis operations, but we have determined that the regulations as they're drafted are consistent with the general plan, and that the right to farm ordinance would not apply in this particular case. Permit limits, the comment was made at the workshop that permit limits may encourage violations. We've removed the permit limits from that previous ordinance. That comments were made that we should direct outcomes by using permit levels rather than by zoning district. We have kept the zoning district requirements in consultation with the ad hoc committee, but we've allowed multiple operators on a property, and we have removed the permit limits again. We believe that we will have a appropriate level of review for the Planning Commission consideration for those types of applications. Personal cultivation, the comment was made about infeasibility of that draft ordinance for personal cultivation. We went back and added Chapter 7.95 that provides the opportunity for us to take a look at setback requirements, as well as to have a registration of personal cultivation, so that when and if we get complaints or and we need to begin enforcement activities, we know that someone has the personal cultivation, and we do not need to then go out and investigate, and they would not then have someone knocking on their door. Restricting signage was another concern of the Planning Commission. We've removed that from the previous ordinance. So again, we developed a second draft coming out of the Planning Commission and public meetings. We removed the permit limits. We're allowing manufacturing with cultivation in the farmland zones. as well as industrial zones. We're now allowing multiple operations on one property that's subject to future limitation by state regulations when and if those state regulations are developed. We've separated the business license requirement from the regulations. We've clarified the personal cultivation requirements in Chapter 7.95, and we've removed the signage restrictions. We did an initial study on the second draft ordinance. We determined that as drafted, the regulations have a less than significant effect on the environment. That negative declaration was circulated from May 20th through June 21st, which was yesterday. The comment period's now closed. We did receive several comments on the initial study. Many of them were comments on the regulations and not the adequacy of the review of the environmental document. Those comments were aimed at concern, in at least one case, concern about impacts on county services and code enforcement, and how the county would address and respond to cultivation, particularly in South County and some of the remoter areas of the county. There was a concern about the number of truck trips and water use in going on with some of the operations in one of the comments. Those were aimed, I believe, at existing operations that have not been permitted, but our ordinances would address those types of impacts through the use permit and coastal development permit process. There was concerns about the impact of the ordinances on property values. There was several comments that were received regarding opening up the ordinance to allow cultivation in the grazing lands, the permanent grazing and rural grazing zoning districts. And I'll bring up a map, and I'll get into that, I believe, after I'm concluded with my presentation here, because I've been talking for a while. But there's a need. There was a desire to have outdoor cultivation, and there was one comment from the Coastal Commission staff that recommended that we modify Title 20 to not allow cannabis activities in the industrial zones that are designated as coastal dependent or coastal related. And that primarily is Moss Landing in that particular area. The industrial areas within Moss Landing are designated for coastal dependent uses in the Coastal Act. So that comment has been submitted by the Coastal Commission. Their other request was that we make clear, and by adding a finding in Title 20, that we require a finding of consistency with the water policies of the local coastal programs. We believe that was part of the ordinance anyway. Since we are requiring coastal development permits in each case, there would be a consistency analysis done. So that would be a clarification of what was already assumed to happen. And then we did receive a comment from the Air Quality District. They are supportive of the measures as they're drafted, and in terms of odor and air quality. And we did make some changes after the circulation of the initial study to the ordinances. Those changes were primarily clarifications to the language and process within the ordinance, included updating some security requirements within those draft ordinances in terms of adding security, the need for security for each type of operation. We've updated the implementation period of the ordinance. The operative date is tied to a vote of the people on a tax measure on medical cannabis operations. We've clarified that what the standards are for background checks and when an application would be denied for a medical cannabis permit. And we have clarified that in the industrial zones as well as in the farmland zones, commercial cultivation would only be allowed within existing structures that were illegally established as of January 1st, 2016. Those changes, we believe, did not introduce new environmental impacts and did not require revisions or circulation to the negative declaration. We have one minor item of cleanup. We would like to add to section 7.95.030K, which is the definition of personal medical cannabis cultivation, the words cultivation by. And that just is so that that definition is not tied to a person, but to the cultivation by a person. So I am going to turn now my presentation over to the sheriff, and I'd like him to address you for a moment, if you don't mind.
Good morning, members of the commission. The reason I'm here today is because I heard that there was talk about, I'm sorry, my Sheriff Steve Burnell, Monterey County Sheriff's Office. I heard that that you're going to be considering allowing outdoor grows, and in my professional opinion, that's crazy talk. We already have outdoor grows all over Monterey County that are out of control. And we don't even have this ordinance in place yet. And I just want to put it on the record that I'm not per se anti-marijuana, I'm anti-impact. Let me read you, I'll get through this quickly, but I'd like to read you some of the studies that I have been a part of, that some conferences I have attended and some studies that I've gotten through those conferences. A major study published in Drug and Alcohol Dependence by researchers at Columbia University looked at two separate data sheets and found that residents of states with medical marijuana had marijuana abuse dependence rates almost twice as high as states without such laws. Additionally, a study in September of 2011 issue of Annals of Epidemiology found that among youths aged 12 to 17, marijuana use rates were higher in states with medical marijuana laws, 8.6%, compared to those without such laws, 6.9%. Since certain states began permitting dispensing of medical marijuana, adolescents' perception of the harmful effects of marijuana have decreased, and marijuana use has increased significantly. There is medical value in marijuana, but that doesn't make smoked or ingested raw marijuana medicine. Opium also has medical value, but we deliver it through morphine, not by injecting heroin. So we must increase research about the medicinal components of marijuana and the safest forms of their delivery. Marijuana is classified as a Schedule I because it meets the legal criteria for that. There's currently no FDA-approved product of whole raw marijuana, smoked, ingested, or vaporized. But there are Schedule III marijuana-based products such as Marinol and others that are being developed. In states with medical marijuana laws, less than 5% of users have a serious illness like HIV, glaucoma, cancer, or MS. The average user is in his mid-30s, has a history of drug abuse, no chronic illness, and reports only pain and headaches. Marijuana itself is not an approved medicine under the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's scientific review process, yet 16 states, including California and the District of Columbia, have permitted marijuana to be sold as medicine for various conditions. Although some of the individual orally administered components of the cannabis plant have medical value, smoking marijuana is an inefficient and harmful method for delivering the constituent elements that have or may have medicinal value. The FDA process for approving medicine remains the only scientific and legally recognized procedure for bringing safe and effective medications to the American public. To date, the FDA has not found smoked marijuana to be either safe or effective medicine for any condition. So my question is, why are we moving forward on something that isn't even FDA approved? The American Cancer Society is supportive of more research into the benefits of cannabis. The American Cancer Society does not advocate the use of inhaled marijuana or legalization of marijuana. The American Society of Addiction Medicine. Cannabis and cannabis-based products and cannabis delivery devices should be subject to the same standards that are applicable to other prescription medications and medical devices. American Glaucoma Foundation, marijuana or its components administered systemically cannot be recommended without a long-term trial which evaluates the health of the optic nerve. This ordinance kind of puts Monterey County and the Sheriff's Office in a position, a compromising position of violating federal law by allowing the cultivation of a Scheduled I controlled substance. Major studies by researchers at Columbia University and elsewhere found that states with medical marijuana laws had marijuana abuse dependent rates almost twice as high as states without such laws. In Colorado, according to the Department of Health, only 2% of users reported cancer, and less than 1% reported HIV/AIDS as their reason for marijuana. The vast majority, 94%, reported severe pain. You know, it wasn't long ago that I was working as a patrol deputy, and I would contact young adults, you know, teenagers that had medical marijuana cards. And it was frustrating because they would go see doctors that would give them these cards for a small fee, which essentially it legalized marijuana in California. I would see these same subjects out riding their motorcycle or out riding their skateboard, yet they have a medical marijuana card for back pain, for knee pain. At present in California and in several other states, it is widely recognized that the reality of the medical use of marijuana is highly questionable. For payment of a small cash sum, almost anybody can obtain a physician's recommendation to purchase, possess, and use marijuana for alleged medical purposes. Indeed, numerous studies have shown that most of the customers of these dispensaries do not suffer from chronic, debilitating conditions such as HIV or cancer. This system has essentially legalized marijuana for recreational use, at least amongst those individuals able and willing to buy the recommendation. A recent documentary on the Discovery Channel, which examined the practices of Harborside Health Center in Oakland, by its own admission, the largest marijuana dispensary on the planet, the buds, which are distributed directly to member patients, are merely examined visually and with a microscope. The buds are also handled by employees who do not use gloves or face masks. Steve D'Angelo, Harborside's co-founder, states that they must take it as it comes. The documentary noted that some plant material is tested by Steep Hill Laboratory, but there is no evidence that Steep Hill's instrumentation and techniques are validated, that its operators are properly trained and educated, that its reference standards are accurate, and that its results are replicable by other laboratories. I'm almost done here. I see people are looking at the money value in this, and as far as tax revenue, studies have shown that for every $1 in alcohol and tobacco tax revenue, society loses $10 in social costs from accidents and health coverage. The lottery and other forms of gambling, the lottery and other forms of gambling have not solved our budget problem, so consider that. So what I'm seeing in Monterey County here is it's all about the money. If you think that allowing outdoor grows, that's going to land in the hands of cancer patients, glaucoma patients, people that have chronic pain, you're mistaken. I've seen it land in the hands of kids people that don't have real medical use for it. Grows are already popping up all over Monterey County. There needs to be a clear consequence in this ordinance to the violation of the ordinance. Now, I grew up in agriculture, and I wouldn't consider myself, an expert, but, you got to consider the water cost too, the cost to the groundwater, the pollution to the groundwater, the pesticides. I don't know of any pesticides that are registered for marijuana. And from my understanding, outdoor grows are going to require more pesticides than indoor grows. Finally, there was also a question that regulations would help reduce the impact on resources if Monterey County were to receive complaints. So my question is, should we legalize gang activity? Because the Sheriff's Office and Salinas Police Department, we really don't have the resources to attack the gang problem. Should we legalize meth and heroin? Because we don't have the resources to deal with it. So why don't we just legalize it? I don't think we should give in just because of the impact on our resources. It's gotten to where the beginning of this ordinance, I was under the impression it was going to be controlled, small-scale, indoor grows, and it's gotten to where we're already seeing outdoor grows pop up all over the place. We're seeing greenhouses that are growing it. I'm to the point to where I'm in favor of an all-out ban of medical marijuana in Monterey County. The direction it's going, look out Humboldt County, Monterey County is going to be the cannabis capital of the world. So I would strongly urge you not to allow large outdoor grows, commercial outdoor grows, and keep the indoor grows at a small scale. We don't have the resources to deal with either one of them, but if you just allow the all-out outdoor grows, I can put together, if we had an all-out ban on on any outdoor grows, I can put together a team and we can eradicate outdoor grows cheaper, less expensive than we can deal with the legal grows. We're going to see a huge societal impact in Monterey County if you allow this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Gill.
Thank you, Sheriff Bernal, for coming to speak with us.
Thank you.
As you know, we are not tasked with the policy decision of whether or not this is going to be something that's allowed per se for the reasons that you mostly spoke about. We're supposed to be talking about land use.
Correct.
And I'm a little confused about the outcome that you expect from your testimony. Are you suggesting that we should not forward the recommendation in the staff packet to the Board of Supervisors, but instead recommend a complete ban? Or are you supportive of the recommendation of the staff that we see before us at this time?
As a law enforcement professional, I'm in favor of a complete ban. I don't think that's going to happen. I would ask that you, I think what we're doing today is considering outdoor grows, and I am against outdoor grows,
So
from what I understand.
through the chair.
Go ahead, yes.
Thank you. What we've put before you is an attempt to allow limited cultivation in a manner that would provide medical cannabis to the county and the state in areas where we believe it's appropriate. What is in the draft ordinance before you does not allow outdoor cultivation at this time.
I'll follow up through the chair. I understand that, and I'm attempting to explore and make sure I understand what the sheriff is telling us about that. I understood the sheriff to say that were outdoor grows to be illegal, then the department would have the tools to stop them. I'm from Big Sur, and I'm finding this a little bit implausible, since marijuana up until recently was entirely illegal, and I live with impacts from outdoor grows and have for certainly 30 years, if not more. So I'm exploring what the sheriff is recommending and why to make sure that I understand it, as this is the purpose of this technical presentation. And so what I'm hearing is that, please correct me if I'm wrong, that if you were to recommend anything, you would recommend against adoption of this slate of ordinances in favor of a complete ban. And failing that, you would be supportive of the staff recommendation as written, not as may be adjusted under the public testimony that we are engaged in obtaining?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions of the sheriff? Seeing none, thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Okay, Jackie.
Through the chair, we'd like to then show, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Bernal. So again, what we're trying to do is provide a draft ordinance that balances the need to protect neighborhoods, to protect our environment, while still providing the opportunity for the cannabis business to be here and to provide medicine for their patients. Within our draft ordinances, we're not allowing outdoor cultivation at this time. What it does is it directs medical cannabis operations towards existing structures within the farmland zones and industrial areas and dispensaries within the commercial zones. And so to help visualize that and to get back to this issue of the rural grazing zoning districts, we have this map in front of you. And the map, these circles, the blue and yellow circles, are where we know we have existing commercial greenhouse facilities. These are usually large existing greenhouse facilities that were nurseries growing cut flowers and things of that sort. So we also are showing in green along the Salinas Valley floor the farmland zoning district, where cultivation and manufacturing could occur with a use permit in an existing permitted structure. There is a large stock of existing greenhouses that we know of. We're allowing multiple operations on those properties with the appropriate permits. We also have some industrial areas throughout these zones where cultivation, manufacturing, transportation, distribution, and testing would be permitted, both in the coastal and inland zone, subject to those permits. What we do not allow and what we don't have permitted within our zoning code is the rural grazing, outdoor cultivation, and rural grazing zoning districts and permanent grazing zoning districts. And those grazing lands typically are found at resource conservation, rural grazing, and permanent grazing are found generally outside of the farmland zoning districts, all along the forested area, down toward around Fort Hunter Liggett to the southern part of our border and all the way out towards Parkfield and the mountainous areas that are remote and not easily accessible. We understand and have reason to believe that many growing operations are being established or have been established in these areas, and it is difficult to enforce. So within our ordinance, we have not provided cannabis activities as a use allowed within those zoning districts. So to bring things to a conclusion, we are recommending that the Planning Commission consider the negative declaration in front of you and adopt a resolution of recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt the draft ordinances with the one amendment I presented earlier, adding the words cultivation by to the Board of Supervisors. So adopt the resolution recommending approval to the Board of Supervisors. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions, staff? Commissioner Mendez?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Craig, can you go back to map, you had that up earlier, please? Yeah, right there. I just want to make sure I understand this. The blue and yellow are existing, right? They're existing, the
Yes.
blue and yellow. So under this ordinance, if it does pass, if the ordinance does pass, are farmers allowed to pop up new structures, new greenhouses with this? Or these that I'm looking at right now, those are the only ones that are allowable under the ordinance if it passes?
Through the chair. Our ordinance requires that cultivation occur within an existing, a structure that was established legally prior to January 1st of this year.
Okay.
In the farmland zoning district. So these dots were existing as of January 1st of this year. They could make an application for a use permit to have cultivation within those greenhouses. There may also be some smaller greenhouses that were permitted in the farmland zoning districts. And farmers are allowed to build greenhouses with permission, but those new greenhouses wouldn't be for the purpose of cannabis because of that restriction in our draft ordinances.
Okay, I don't really get the reasoning behind that. You know, I mean, if a farmer wants to pop up a new greenhouse, you know, and I don't see why he or she shouldn't. You know, so what's the reasoning behind that? You know?
We believe that there will be pressure from the industry for space because we're limiting it to indoor sites, that farmlands would then have pressure to develop greenhouse on basically very important statewide prime farmland, which then, you know, it covers some of our valley soils and farmland opportunities with greenhouses. And with the pressures of this industry in particular, we're trying to avoid a proliferation of greenhouses in the prime farmland areas.
All right, thanks, Craig. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Dill?
Following up on Commissioner Mendez's point, two things. First, the reason you feel there would be this pressure is because you are limiting the ability to grow to indoor grows. If it was not limited, that pressure would be alleviated. So we've introduced a problem to address a problem, which is generally not considered to be a policy, a desirable policy approach. And I would just put that in there as one way. Simplification is often a way to avoid these kinds of things. But the other thing I want to point out here is that you know about these facilities, and I want you to point out the ones that have been attempting to be open about what they're doing and operate legally, and who will, if this ordinance were passed as written, no longer be able to have that opportunity. Because the limit is very much going to rule out many of these blue dots that you've put and these yellow dots that you've put that you actually have on are not eligible under your current zoning proposal, as I understand it. I mean, the ones in Carmel Valley, I don't know, are they capable of being used, or put up for a use permit or not? Doesn't appear to me that they are.
If I understand, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Looks to me like the only possibility for people to move forward, apply for a use permit to move into this kind of an operation, it only exists on farmlands, and it only exists in a few locations. These particular locations, whether they're greenhouses or not, are not eligible, are they?
There are several there are several dots that are not in the farmland zone.
Right.
Yes.
Not several, I would get, looks to me like, according to your map, we could zoom in, but at least half. North County has a bunch of them as well. So we are, in fact, moving to a more restrictive situation than has been the case under people's understanding of things at the moment. And we aren't talking about all existing greenhouses being available for this use. the reason we have existing greenhouses in excess, as I understood it, was because the cut flower industry was damaged by federal policy, and the demand that had existed previously no longer exists. The boom and bust of this kind of agriculture is not something that's specific to a particular product. But if the goal is to use resources we have for something that may be appropriate for them, we have, under the current formulation of zoning, we're looking at least a third, if not a half, of the available stock not being allowed to take advantage of this opportunity, or even to consider this opportunity. And I'm puzzled as to why, because clearly those are not going to be new greenhouses that are going to be instituted for this purpose.
Okay. There are some greenhouses in zones that are not coastal agricultural preserve or farmland zone that would be excluded by the zoning requirements in the draft ordinance. These ones sort of in the middle of North County, in fact, I believe are designated as agricultural preserve. So it could be the recommendation that we include in the agricultural preserve zoning, as well as the coastal agricultural preserve in Title 20, if that would be the direction you like to go.
If I could follow through the chair? I'm not attempting to discuss what we should do right now. I'm trying to understand what you have done and what you are proposing. Mm-hmm. And I want to know why. If the concern is to keep more greenhouses from being built and to use the existing greenhouses, the current proposal doesn't seem to address that terribly well. There are a number of existing greenhouses that are not included. And I'm trying to understand the rationale behind that.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Holmes?
I know staff has done an assessment as far as looking at where the existing greenhouses are, as well as the setbacks that are established in the ordinance. So I think, if Mr. Spencer could explain if these are just the dots of where the existing facilities are versus if they represent the ones that also meet the setback requirements. And then when you did your analysis as far as how many facilities there are actually available, in other words, potential permits, if maybe you could explain that to the commission, that might help explain, I think, what Commissioner No?
Through the chair, that's not really, it's a much simpler question. Before we get, I'm anxious to get to public comment. I don't wish to go to that level of analysis because I don't think it's necessary. I'm just trying to look at the large question of why, if we're trying to encourage the use of our existing agricultural resources, including vacated greenhouses, if that's one of the policy things we're trying to do here, these are some of the greenhouses. The use permit process would tend to address the considerations that I believe Mr. Holm has raised. If there were setbacks required, or there weren't every greenhouse won't fit. But why are we excluding a significant portion of existing greenhouses from the opportunity for consideration is where I'm going. At a policy level, not at a specific situational level.
Mr. Holmes? No. With your minutes?
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on Commissioner Deal's comments. Looking at these circles, dots, whatever you want to call them, some of them are on agricultural zones, and some of them are on farmland zones, right? Mm-hmm. So the ones that are on farmland do not qualify if this ordinance does pass. Or I mean, is that correct? Is that not?
Yes, the farmland and agricultural zones we've added as use allowed, subject to a permit, cannabis activities within existing structures. So they would be, there would be an opportunity for cultivation at those sites.
Commissioner Vanderveer?
Yes, I'd just like to, a couple of comments. I mean, I completely agree with Commissioner Deal that it's a concern that we're, this limit to certain zones seems a little odd when, the question is, if we have commercial greenhouses, does it really matter what zone they're in if they meet the other requirements? It seems like what we're trying to do is to implement through our own regulations the Compassionate Use Act, and what we have in front of us seems more like the Compassion for Owners of Certain Existing Greenhouses Act, rather than an overall Compassionate Use Act. I'm also very concerned, and I'm looking forward to hearing the public testimony on this as well as other issues, about what's been a problem for a long time in this county, which is damaging illegal grows on public land. And obviously, it's been demonstrated over and over again for decades that law enforcement is not capable of preventing such grows, and it seems like the way, if you really wanted to prevent those grows, is if you provide an avenue for people to grow, on real ag land, private ag land, not on public land out in the woods, you would essentially remove the incentive for people to engage in those illegal grows, because the growing would be, the market, high value as this crop may be, the market is not unlimited. And certainly it would be difficult for people who are carrying things on their backs into the woods to compete with people who are growing legally outdoors. So I would like, so I'm having a hard time understanding from a law enforcement perspective, I guess, why we would not want to have permitted and regulated outdoor growing. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that as this hearing progresses.
Commissioner Hasselman?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Spencer, would you kind of zoom in on South County for me on this map that's on the...
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay, thank you very much. So my original concern, and I certainly understand the farmland that you're trying to protect in the Salinas Valley, but the zoning for farmland seems, well, number one, not all farmland is created equal, and the rich, dark soils in the Salinas Valley are, trust me, a lot different than the farmland that you can see in the area that I come from. So I would echo Commissioner Vanderveer's concerns that if what we're trying to do is to encourage greenhouse growth, and I can certainly understand that from the sheriff's viewpoint and from a few other people that I've heard from, then why not allow greenhouse growing, basically, if they meet all of the requirements, the permitting, the grading, the building permits, everything else, almost anywhere in Monterey County, because it might, in my opinion, be a better use, as Commissioner Deal pointed out, a better way to use land that otherwise would not be, it is not as economically viable as some of the farmland. But on the other hand, if what we're trying to do is only use those stocks of greenhouses that are already there, then it gets back to my original objection from the last go-around, that we are unfortunately rewarding people, and we're choosing winners again, and that bothers me a lot, that we are somehow giving our providence to something that is non-competitive for the rest of the industry. So those are my comments. I too am interested to hear what the public has to say about this.
Are there any other questions of staff? I just have one question. There was some materials we got on collective farming. So could you explain exactly there on grazing land, I believe, are we talking about two different things here? I'm referring to collectives.
Collectives are a model that was created by the Compassionate Use Act and Senate Bill 420. They are groups there are individuals, qualified patients who band together, cooperate, and collectively to cultivate and dispense medical marijuana to the people within their collective. So up until recently, the collective model has been you have a certain number of qualified patients that are part of your collective. You can grow cannabis plants on behalf of those qualified patients as a collective, and then theoretically you would be dispensing the product to the members of your collective. And that is a model that, you know, is more convenient for some qualified patients who don't or can't grow on their own behalf. So the 100 square feet personal grow, so they band together as part of a collective. That model has sort of gone away with the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. It's now defined as commercial cannabis activities in the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act. So they're no longer necessarily nonprofit, collective, cooperative operations.
I could follow up on that. I mean, just to reiterate in some ways what Mr. Spencer said. You've had a change in state law, in essence. So in 2004, the Medical Marijuana Program Act was adopted, and under that act, a qualified patient or primary caregiver could possess a certain amount, or could grow a certain amount of marijuana, or it allowed qualified patients and designated primary caregivers to collectively or cooperatively cultivate marijuana. So based on that 2004 model, there were these large collective cooperative associations of qualified patients. Last fall, the state legislature passed this new licensing scheme, the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, the MRSA, people call that. And so under that, it's going to sort of basically phase out the requirement that it be a collective and cooperative association, and instead it set up this regime of licensing for cultivation, for dispensing, for manufacturing, for testing, and it has a small, basically personal use exemption for personal cultivation, and then everything else is subject to the state licensing requirements. So while staff was, after this county adopted the interim ordinance, this change occurred. So the draft regulations you have are basically based on the new MRSA requirements, because that's what's now the foundation of state law. So I'm happy to provide any more information about that, but really it's sort of been this transformation of state law.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Seeing none. It's about 10:10 right now. So instead of stopping public and then taking a break, we're gonna have a 15-minute break right now. After the break, we'll start with public comment.
You couldn't answer that. And I think.
Good morning, everyone. So, when everyone gets back on their seats, and Wendy, where's Wendy? I believe we have to wait for county council, so I got a little head up myself. So if you hold 1 second, we'll get county council.
They're there. You just can't see them until it's at a...
Oh, there they are.
Again, good morning, everyone. Monterey County Planning Commission is back in session. We're going to open up for the public comment, and we're going to limit it to 3 minutes. I'll try to, depending on how many speakers are, I might be a little more liberal on it, but again, it'll be only 3 minutes. So we'll start with the first speaker.
Mr. Chair, at this point, we have 10 speaker slips of those that have been submitted. First speaker will be Connie Bauer, followed by Peter Brazil. Is Connie Bauer here?
Mr. Chair, while the speaker's coming up, can I just say a couple of things? And the first is that we really appreciate you coming up and helping us get through this. So if your name is called, you could come forward and be prepared to speak. It would be helpful. The second is that it is incumbent upon us to make this a safe space for people to speak what they believe to be important to the discussion. And to that end, I would very much appreciate it if we are supportive of all speakers equally, and that means no clapping for the ones you agree with or booing the ones you don't agree with or expressing things that might have a tendency to make the chamber unfriendly for any view that may be expressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And again, to remind you, you've got a 3-minute limit.
Sure. Well, first, I'd like to say I appreciate being able to come and speak today.
Excuse me to interrupt so quickly. Could you state your name?
My name is Connie Bauer, and I'm here to speak on behalf of a small family farm in Greenfield that I work for. We at Creekside Farms for 25 years have been growing lavender and culinary herbs. One of the things that we are looking at with this new cannabis cultivation that's coming to our area is possibly expanding what we do. We don't want to discontinue the business we've been doing for 25 years. We'd like to see if there's a way to expand it. With the limit on the greenhouses that are in this draft ordinance, you're basically locking out all the existing farmers that don't already have a greenhouse. And it seems to me that only the people with the greenhouse get the golden egg. And it's creating a monopoly, and I think it's unfair. So I'm just here to speak that I know it's a process, but I really wish that they could look at the recommendation of approving additional greenhouses in the appropriate areas. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker.
Next speaker, Peter Brazil, followed by Joey Espinosa.
Morning, members of the commission. My name is Peter Brazil. I'm Associate Attorney at L&G. Make this really brief. Generally, as drafted, the amended ordinances are a good starting point or a good stepping point. At a policy level, it will get operators legal and reporting, which generally is a good idea. I want to address two minor issues. First, the taxes. I'm basically wanting to ensure that the taxes that are going to be implemented through these ordinances are reasonable and flexible, keeping in mind that there'll be taxes and fees at the state level as well. And these are going to be new, some of these are new owners and operators.
Could you speak on through the mic, please?
Okay, sorry. And a heavy tax burden on a new endeavor or an emerging endeavor makes that endeavor that much more difficult. Also, the way it's drafted right now, you've tied the passage and full implementation of the ordinances to the passage of this tax in a very narrow time frame. You may want to consider opening that up somewhat or not tying it as tightly to the implementation, because otherwise the benefits which we just talked about getting everybody legal and reporting and bringing this kind of industry out of the shadows would just kind of fall to the wayside. Additionally, I want to talk about greenhouses as well in a different respect. The ordinances specifically allow for multiple permits per parcel is what I'm looking for. Right now it's kind of vague, and this is probably an extension of what MRSA is also doing. They mention permits per premises, and they haven't clarified that, and they're supposed to clarify that. But let's make efficient use of the greenhouses that we actually have by allowing in clearly in the ordinances allowing for multiple permits per parcel. So in general, we just wanted to support the ordinances as amended. and also mention maybe pushing, or I mean, I know that there's, and we already talked to you, Craig, about it, updating the coastal zone as soon as possible, and I know that's a time frame that's kind of fungible, but, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next two speakers.
Joey Espinoza, followed by Janet Louie. Good morning, Commission and staff, everybody in attendance. My name is Joey Espinoza. I'm with the Coastal Growers Association and Monterey County NORML. I hope that you all had some time to read our letter. I know it was kind of submitted late. I wanted to touch on two topics. It seems that in the staff report, they have an idea of helping to deter illegal water diversion, illegal grading, erosion, etc., by allowing for indoor cultivation and greenhouse cultivation. I just want to point out that these are really all separate issues. Regardless of a cannabis ordinance or not, illegal grading is illegal grading, illegal water diversion is legal water diversion, so they should be treated on a case-to-case basis. And people who are going to be a part of the regulatory process and pay their permit fees, et cetera, are obviously going to be much less likely to do illegal grading and things of that nature that will jeopardize their operation after they've put a substantial investment into it. The point I wanted to kind of point out is that we shouldn't allow people that do it the wrong way to prevent others from doing it the right way. We should allow people to do it the right way with the proper ordinance. The other thing, quickly on security, there are security firms that have helped other states that have outdoor cultivation. They have achieved security with outdoor crops. You know, things such as ways right around the fences, motion sensor lights, alarms, surveillance cameras. Those are all things that we could possibly implement to help deter any sort of problems. Plus, when you're looking at outdoor cultivation, you're not going to have as many harvests per year as you will with the indoor and the greenhouse operation. And truly, the harvesting time and the drying and curing time is the most risky time in terms of security, because people aren't going to steal a large plant that's not fully matured yet. They're going to most likely want to get it when it's dried and cured and ready for market. So in reality, indoor and greenhouses will have higher security risks based upon how much they're going to harvest per year. The second topic I wanted to talk about was the renewable energy requirement. I read that the indoor cultivators will have to have some sort of renewable energy, I believe up to 50% of what they use. Staff can correct me if that's wrong. We have to remember that these are very expensive startups. These are expensive businesses to take on, especially when you're doing it completely compliant and you're paying all your payroll taxes, your sales taxes. We may have a state tax that we're going to pay, and then whatever the county implements on us, we could be looking at a 25 to 40% tax after it's all said and done. So to add the burden of expensive investment of renewable energy right off the get-go seems counterproductive to me. We are taxed much more than many other businesses. And an idea to offset the carbon footprint of indoor cultivation is perhaps to allow outdoor cultivation, because these plants do love CO2, and it could be a way to counteract that. Briefly, since I have 30 seconds, I just want to touch on the personal cultivation permit. We have a concern regarding the privacy of that. We want to make sure that these permits aren't going to be open for public record, and anybody can look up your information to see what you're doing. Remember that these patients have to get the recommendation renewed once a year anyhow by a licensed California physician to make sure they are basically within the law. And it seems that it would be pretty unenforceable overall, especially when considered the concerns about enforcing the commercial side of this. To add the component of personal just seems like a bigger burden for everybody. Thank you for your time. Janet Louie, followed by Daniel Sosa.
Good morning. My name is Janet Louie, and I am a California flower farmer. My husband Curtis and I have been operating Green Valley Floral in Salinas since 1990. We currently have 45 full-time employees, 2 locations, with a total of 650,000 square feet of computer-controlled greenhouses. We ship cut flowers 6 days a week, year-round, to customers throughout the United States and Canada. A lot of things have changed in the floral industry since 1973, when my parents built 10 acres of wooden greenhouses and planted them with roses in Salinas. At the time, the outlook for growing roses in the area seemed pretty optimistic. Demand was high, supply was limited. Monterey County at that time had over 65 greenhouses of cut flower growers of Japanese descent. Many are my relatives and friends of our families. They all came from the same villages in Japan and made foot here. Then imports from South America began to ramp up during the 1990s, and we saw some dramatic changes in the cut flower industry. Unfortunately, due to federal trade policy, direct and indirect subsidies, imports from South America, primarily Colombia, they've had a negative impact on flower farming in our communities. It caused farms to close their doors. and 25 years after the Andean Trade Preferences Act, which provided duty-free access to imported flowers, about 80% of all cut flowers sold in the United States are now imported. At Green Valley Floral, we still grow roses. However, as it stands today, less than 2% of all roses sold in the United States are actually grown here. Today, there are only 10 rose cut flower growers in the United States, and we are the only commercial cut flower grower left in Monterey County. Our controlled greenhouse operation has become known for reliable quality of garden-style roses, hydroponic gerberas, and oriental lilies. We added this year an acre of solar panels that runs our entire operation, at least 5 acres of fans in our greenhouses. It's an amazing project to get into. We can expand that because we have the technology. I serve as an alternate commissioner on the state's California Cut Flower Commission. More than ever, there's a renewed interest, demand in locally grown flowers. We have to work hard to get our products to market more effectively. Given the challenges we face with labor, energy, regulation, we're still here and optimistic about our future. Like many, we were initially skeptical when we watched out-of-town interests begin acquiring vacant and abandoned greenhouses. However, we soon began to understand the importance of repurposing the existing stock of greenhouses to grow other agricultural products, including medical cannabis. We see this as a great economic growth opportunity for the Salinas Valley. In our case, the opportunity to diversify our greenhouses to grow other agricultural products, including medical cannabis, will permit us to continue operating our family business as the last commercial rose grower in Monterey County. We intend to seek permits to cultivate, not simply lease out our greenhouses to other growers.
Can I ask you to wrap it up, please?
I'll wrap it up. We have reviewed the staff report and draft resolutions. I would like to commend the staff and ad hoc committee on extensive outreach discussions you've had with all the stakeholders. The staff and ad hoc committee has, in our opinion, acted responsibly by striking what we believe to be an appropriate balance between a great number of competing interests. We request that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt the staff's recommendation as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your time.
Daniel Sosa, followed by Lynn Sosa.
Greetings, Board of Commissioners. My name is Daniel Sosa. I own 3 contiguous parcels in the Lockwood area of Monterey County. They are zoned PG40. I have been cultivating outdoor on 2 of those parcels since 2013. I have done so responsibly, with considerations for the integrity of the neighborhood and the environment at the forefront of my mind. My operation is secure, uses a legal water source, has had the grading and other permitting issues signed off by the county, and we have never cut down one tree. I even met sheriffs at my property at their request 2 years ago, answered their questions, provided them with a binder full of legal patients, shook their hands, and never heard from them again. All of the medicine produced goes to a legally compliant dispensary in Los Angeles, which I operate. As the ordinance language currently stands, medical marijuana cultivation of any kind would be prohibited on PG40 zoned properties. I feel that with certain provisions, outdoor cultivation on PG40 zoned properties can be done in a manner that is responsible and low impact. Certainly much more low impact than the carbon footprint created by the energy consumption of indoor grows. I would like to propose that Type 3 outdoor cultivation permits and Type 4 nursery cultivation permits be allowed on PG40 parcels that can meet certain provisions, exampled by demonstrating that the cultivation has been taking place on the property prior to the interim control ordinance in July of 2015, which can be demonstrated by an acknowledgement by the county or a previous attempt to obtain a permit. Another idea would be allowing it on PG40 zoned properties that apply for a building permit and promise to build a home within 2 years, say by January 1st, 2018. I believe it is only fair to allow those who have been cultivating legally and responsibly since prior to 2015 be allowed an opportunity to continue to cultivate legally and responsibly if they can meet certain provisions. Thank you very much.
Daniel Sosa.
Lynn Sosa, followed by Jody Pemberton.
Good morning, Planning Commissioners. My name is Lynn Sosa, and same last name. My son Daniel Sosa just spoke. I'm here to support him, make it short and sweet. He has been cultivating outdoors responsibly in Monterey County on PG 40 zoned land since 2013. And we say responsibly because he has done it all the right way. And I'm asking that you please allow commercial growers like Daniel, who have proved to be caring and responsible over the years, to be allowed a pathway to compliance under the new ordinance. It's only fair. Thank you very much.
Jody Pemberton, followed by Susan Selleck.
Good morning. My name is Jody Pemberton, and I'm with the TRX Collective. We are asking the board to please, at the very least, consider amending the proposed ordinance to allow applicants from commercial agricultural zones the opportunity to apply for a use permit. These applicants would need to meet whatever criteria is established for farmland. I handed out the paper that you were asking about earlier. It is the cannabis zoning ordinance that came out May 28th, May 18th, the last one. And I've added in the red and yellow is what we're proposing. I'd like to share 3 points highlighting why this ordinance should be amended. Number 1, this proposal refers only to the ability to apply for a use permit. Of course, all applicants would need to go through the extensive application process set up by the county and be subject to the established regulations and proposed findings outlined in the ordinance. Number 2, the zoning regulations for farmland and other commercial agricultural zones are identical. They read, uses allowed, all soil-dependent agricultural uses, including crop and tree farming, dry land farming, livestock farming, greenhouses, and vineyards. All county residents in commercial agricultural zones who meet the established criteria should be allowed to apply for a use permit. And last but certainly not least, limiting the ability to apply for a use permit will have far-reaching consequences to those collectives who desire to stay compliant with emerging county and state regulations. Because as you've heard, applying for a state permit is predicated on first securing a county permit. If the ordinance is not amended, I feel the county will lose promising opportunities for employment, growth, and community building, and will force these otherwise compliant collectives out of business. Thank you for your consideration.
Susan Selleck, followed by Natalie Anicetti.
Good morning. My name is Susan Selix. I'm a resident of this county. I've owned property here for 20 years. My past experiences, I'm a public policy attorney and have spent most of my 30-something career involved in horticulture, a senior consultant in the Assembly Agriculture Committee, founder and CEO of the California Cut Flower Commission, and extensive experience in land use and planning. And I come forward today by virtue of having other people in the industry here that I've known, acquaintances, have asked me to come in and testify to present sort of a broader base explanation of my perspective. I'm going to be directing my comments to the most recent draft that's been available. There's some disagreements I have with it, but I want to say that I think the county staff has done an impressive job and very thorough job, and I respect what they've done. I think we do have a bit of a premium gold rush at our door here soon, and I think that we should be presenting ourselves with a plan for segregating this community and being very careful before we roll it out, so that we may start with one zone, and I'm not talking about the traditional zone that we have, but maybe specify some growing zones for cannabis, put them into a trial to see how they go before we roll out other zones. You know, we have a five-star agriculture industry, we have a five-star natural resources here, and we have a five-star tourist attraction here. And so we want this commodity to be five-star as well. And that leads me to my concerns with the existing, some of the areas of the ordinance that I'd like to address quickly. One is that I think the idea of having unlimited permits issuances is not a good idea. I think it's a mistake. I think if we do that just based on zoning alone, we're going to be leading from behind. And I think we need to lead from the beginning. And this is our opportunity to lead this industry and properly lay it out in this county so that they can be self-regulated and they fit in with our community as far as excellence goes. We will have to have an enforcement arm, and I think that's going to be very expensive. And I think we have to brace ourselves for what kind of expense that will be. I just will move forward. I disagree with the premise that we should align ourselves with the state law, because actually the state law is broad on purpose with the intent that we are more restrictive.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, please.
Okay. Lastly, I want to mention signage, which I think that we do need to restrict, so I disagree with that. And I think that we could coordinate that a little bit better, and that we roll out, and that dispensaries only be allowed in the county showing a need. And I think that 15 is probably more than we're going to need on county land. I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please get in touch with me.
Natalie Anicetti, followed by Heidi Park.
Good morning. My name is Natalie Anicetti, and I gave this nice lady here a copy of these talking points, and I realize now, I just learned about this meeting last night, that I have been trying to be involved in the ways that I can, but I contacted Dave Potter's office twice to try and get information on meetings about just the, regulations in our area. I did not get a response either time. So some of these talking points aren't necessarily appropriate for this meeting, so I will kind of cover the ones that I think are. So I am concerned about the cultivation of the food in the Salinas Valley, and that it will decrease as farmers may become interested in the lucrative cultivation of marijuana. I heard Dave Potter talk about that himself at a meeting that I spoke with him at. I'm kind of, the term medical marijuana, I feel like it's just a misnomer. It's not that I don't feel there aren't medical uses for marijuana, but the way it's being done, I feel like marijuana should be sold for medical purposes in a pharmacy, much like we would get prescription drugs to treat any of our ailments. So I just feel like the way it's being done, the way, the information that's been shared here today, that it's kind of the horse is out of the barn, and it's like now we're going to try and pretend like it's medical marijuana. And so I just think that it should be sold in pharmacies, and that the growing should be, could be done you're working on setting the regulations for that today, but I do caution the commission that not having really strict regulations would mean that it's just going to be much easier to, the guise of medical marijuana, and really it seems like it's going to be just dispensed publicly to everyone who's not a minor, which will make it easier for minors to get a hold of. And there is currently a illegal medical marijuana clinic that has been asked to close 2 times in Carmel at 26535 Carmel Rancho Boulevard. And it's been selling and operating even though the county has twice told them to stop. And so to the sheriff's point, enforcement is not either happening or is going to be difficult to do. So, looking to see if there's anything else that I wanted to mention. So, at any rate, the area that I'm speaking of at 26535 Carmel Rancho Boulevard is a county area, and as a business owner, I have not had the response from.
Can I ask you to wrap it up?
Yes, the response from the sheriff when I've had to call, not necessarily regarding this situation. They don't have fast response times, and they don't, I just feel like in the county areas, unincorporated areas, it's going to be really, really, really difficult to enforce. Thank you.
Heidi Park, followed by Trina Ward.
Hi, I'm Heidi Park. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I wanted to address a few things that concerns me, and I'm hoping that you consider more changes in the draft before it comes down to the last final draft. One of my concerns is a cottage industry. There is no room in the ordinance for a cottage industry or existing cottage industries that have been existing for over 30 years. I've been compliant. I've been a cultivator and manufacturer, and I want to stay and be legal, as well as any other good actor out here in our audience wants to be legal. And the big box company that will be taking care of the greenhouses is great. I'm all for it. But it also pushes someone like me out of business that wants to take care of her patients as well as grow outdoors, because there are many people that love outdoor cannabis to be made into medicine because of the natural sunlight that comes through to that plant. I don't think that is being addressed at all, that there are people that are organic, and the fertilizer, the dirt, the sunshine, all of that is very big, and I hope that we look at that. Regarding security, I've never had a security issue. People that grow outdoors have been doing this for many, many years that have never had issues of any kind of things that you have to be so afraid of. I think fear is a huge thing that's happening right now in our community of our security issues, when it's never really been a big issue, unless you're some kind of cartel out there that have machine guns. Most of the cultivators and cottage industry people are like me. I mean, gee whiz, yeah, I don't even hunt. But I do have a gun for a rattlesnake, because we have to protect ourselves. If you want me to use a shovel, it's too close to the snake. I'm sorry. But regarding any of this, I think that the draft needs to change in a few ways. You've listened to our words and our voices very nicely, but I feel that the no residential cultivation on page 15 really needs to be exempted out of the draft altogether. And just to finish up, regarding HIPAA privacy and public record, that is a very big concern of mine because that wasn't even in a stakeholders meeting, and that kind of came out of left field for me. It kind of shook the tree. Thank you so much.
Trina Ward, followed by Terry Upton.
Hello, my name is Trina Ward. I'm here because I'm not for this at all. I live on Espinosa Road. I live on 11815 Foxwood Lane. Last Tuesday, we had gentlemen approach my mom's house. I live on the property behind it, and we had 3 gentlemen show up at our doorstep saying that, guess what? We're coming in next door to the nurseries behind us, and we're going to start growing. My mom's husband is Sergeant Terry Kaiser. He's been on the force for at least 44 to 45 years. We had no idea. I don't understand how this is working. I do not want this element in my backyard. My father was killed in a home invasion robbery on this property. The element of this coming in and me dealing with my children that live on the property, plus other residents that also have children, with a security issue. They talked about putting up an 8-foot perimeter fence around the entire length of the property, which butts up to our property. You know, I'm just dumbfounded. I found out last night that this meeting was happening. You know, it's all about money for all of you. But this element is not. It's nothing I think Monterey County should have any business doing. I think you guys are opening up Pandora's box, and I don't think any of you really know what's going to happen. You know? Espinosa Road is a very high traffic road with a lot of people going from Castroville to Salinas, gangbangers, things of that nature. I think when they realize what's going to be growing out here, when they put up this giant 8-foot fence with barbed wire on top of, they talked about having security. They offered my mom's husband a position if he was interested in retiring from the sheriff's department. And walking a perimeter of this nursery with a gun. I mean, is this the kind of element I want coming in here that I have to live with my 3 children? Absolutely not. And I'm lost. I had no idea this was going to be possible. I mean, they can just come in and just start up, and is there nothing I can do? I would like some answers, and I don't know who to talk to. My mom left on a trip yesterday to Oregon. She feels the same way I do, and even stronger. If we have to pick it, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to fight, because I do not approve of any of this. Thank you very much.
Terry Upton is the final speaker card.
Hello, my name is Terry Upton, licensed California landscape contractor, C27 since year 2000. Thank you again for the ability to speak. Thanks, Craig, for the tireless efforts that you put in, how many meetings. I'm in agreement with a lot of the stuff that's happening, also in disagreement with a lot of the stuff that's happening. Currently, is it possible to look at the map? The thing that's disturbing me right now, is the complete absence of legal possibility to grow in the South County. And it seems to be kind of a conflict. There's this notion that we want to save farmland, but now we're going to exclude all of the property that's down south. I think it was Commissioner Getzelman that was commenting the same thing. We have all this area that's primed for outdoor marijuana cultivation in the South County, and it doesn't appear to be not one possibility to use that. That coincides with the fact that this condensed area in this greenhouse zone, it's the obvious favoritism. I don't know who is soliciting this favoritism, and I don't know how this is, I don't understand how this is occurring. It seems like something behind the scenes to me, and the comment was thrown out about choosing winners, and that sure seems to fit. the notion that none of the rural grazing land is going to be optimized for this purpose is baffling. I also wanted to comment that by excluding all of this activity, like Commissioner Deal commented in the last meeting here, was that she wanted to get the people, all the criminals, the cartels out of the backcountry. Well, we need a pathway. The honest individuals, the honest Americans that are just working for a living, yeah, we'd like a legal pathway in order to do this. And that is what the state has mandated with the MRSA. They've given a checklist of possibilities, and really all the local counties have to do is say okay. It seemed to me when I read it that it was a zoning law issue, that for the most part, if a person was not creating any zoning violations, then yes, the state would agree. And so then we get into all these other different issues. But I just don't see why we're creating criminals. Now, I understand the sheriff's job is a very, very difficult one. All this is getting laid on his back. Let's give him some money with a reasonable application fee based on a square footage price. If you want to grow 1,000 square feet, if you want to grow 10,000, obviously there's going to be a limit, but give the sheriff some money for legitimate enforcement and security, all of these different things. I wanted to say with Mr. Souza, I don't need to repeat all of the things that he said. I'm kind of in the same boat.
You don't have time because...
That's it?
Yeah.
No.
You can wrap it up.
Yeah. I just wanted, this is my closing, is just as Aaron Johnson, the attorney, said, he said, if this is your proposal, this was in Bradley, he said, if this is your proposal, you can count on 100% non-compliance. The proposal is good, but there are elements that people are just not going to comply with. But thank you.
Okay, we don't have any more written requests, but could I have a raise of hands if anyone else wishes to speak? We have one, we'll come forward, and you have two. Could you come forward close to the mic?
Good morning. My name is Jeff Lind. I'm from LNG as well as the Coastal Growers Association. First, I'd like to start off by thanking staff for all their hard work on the ordinance and stakeholder meetings and public feedback. I know that that's a very tiring job, and they've done a great job of listening. I have 3 points, and I'll try to go through them very briefly. The first point is that I'm generally supportive of the direction of the ordinance. The second point is that I have some concerns regarding the impacts on local operators. And the third is the time frame and tax implementation. Going to the first point, I'm generally supportive of the direction that this ordinance is heading. It does allow for some operators to be permitted and operate openly. It does allow for greenhouses to be refurbished, or the abandoned greenhouse market to have a solution there, and so that's why I'm generally supportive of it. I do have some concerns about what's going to happen with responsible local operators who are not able to get into this market. It seems like there is a fairly limited supply of greenhouses, and my understanding is they're relatively expensive. Local operators who have been operating responsibly, notably in Carmel Valley, most of Supervisor District 5 area, Big Sur, won't really have anywhere to go other than the Salinas Valley and might not be able to afford the obstacle to get in there. So I would encourage a re-examination of what we can do for existing operations, especially those who have shown that they're responsible. It seems that this ordinance almost creates a series of, the idea is that if you're lucky, you get an operation, not if you have merit or a proven track record. It's also unclear, my third point on the time frame, it's unclear as to when this ordinance will actually take place because there is that tax implementation measure. If the voters approve it, it goes forward, but that's not necessarily a guarantee. So it results in a gamble for most of our operators. Do I try and grab a greenhouse, or does this ordinance actually have a shot of not being implemented? That lack of clarity is concerning, and especially for local operators who put their time and their energy and their life into this. It seems like if we could give something more clear or something that's more consistent, a message to them as to how to go and continue operating, that would be a positive step to make. So those are my 3 points. I'm generally supportive of the ordinance. I have some concerns about the local impact on local operators who are responsible, and also some concerns about the time frame and tax implementation measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There was one more person. Come forward.
My name is Rob Ryan. I'm a resident of Monterey County and a business owner in Santa Cruz. And I've listened today with great interest. I thank you for your work. Being stuck in the middle, trying to regulate a product that's embraced by the state or sanctioned and banned by the federal government, and how to address this is tough, very tough. And I was sorry to hear about the situation with the woman who's going to live near a grow that has a cyclone fence with razor wire. For me, this is about money also, but it's about saving money. I'm a geezer who walks into a medical marijuana dispensary, and all I want to look at is high CBD products. When I take a tincture, my knees don't hurt. My wife is a cancer survivor, and when she takes it, it does good things for her body. There are no side effects. Anything else I could take which would help, well, there is nothing else I can take which helps that doesn't somehow damage the liver or the rest of my body. So this whole idea of putting it just in greenhouses makes no sense to me. It does grow outdoors beautifully, organically, in the sun, in rich soil. I know it doesn't have to be a water hog, and there is no need for pesticides if you manage with that kind of an ethic. Forcing it into greenhouses is going to be energy intensive, it's going to require more chemicals and more pesticides. This is an iPhone. 10 years ago, if you had one of these, you'd wonder if you were walking on a sidewalk in San Francisco if somebody'd steal it from you. So you'd kind of hold it close and be a little bit paranoid. Now you can leave it on the seat of your car and nobody will break in to take it because they're more plentiful. So I suggest you consider a vision of Monterey County ag lands where you have medical marijuana growing near broccoli, and it's quite normal. And this situation stabilizes just like it has with iPhones, and it's not something people want to steal and use guns to take. And what you will do is you will increase the value of ag lands, you'll discourage the encroachment of industry and residences into ag lands, because you're going to have a crop that is an amazing cash cow and generator of tax revenue, and it will protect the farmlands, and it won't poison the groundwater. And so my perspective is, please open your thinking to the fact or the reality that this is a wonderful medicine, and I thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the public wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would first start by saying I've worked with this particular group of people behind me for a while now, and I've been very impressed by them. A lot of the things that were said I don't necessarily disagree with. What we are trying to do is to strike a balance again. And when considering the cumulative effect, many of the people here, I don't question their intent and whether or not they're operating responsibly. Many people who are not operating responsibly are not here and here to tell you they're not operating responsibly, but I'm telling you there are those people out there. And what we are concerned about and what we're balancing here is a cumulative issue. Yes, if we allow cultivation in certain areas, then we need to be considering, does that require a fence? Does that require razor wire? What are the aesthetic impacts of that? What is the water consumption impact on opening up grazing land and outdoor grows at this time? So what we've done is, in this period between when the state comes out with regulations and licensing requirements, we've put forward an ordinance that we believe strikes a balance that allows cultivation in areas that are limited, but there is certainly opportunity to evaluate in the future opening up these areas, as well as opportunity to evaluate recreational cannabis if that does pass on the November ballot as well. I believe that general statement touches on many of the comments you've received. There was a comment I would like to respond to relative to a request for answers regarding cannabis operators moving into a site without permission or without notice. That should not be occurring. What the draft ordinance does is require use permits and coastal development permits for operations, and under that permitting structure in the future, if someone applies for an operation at a site, they would be noticed, 300-foot notice, posting of notices at the site, the general hearing notices, and public hearings to follow, so there would be opportunity to be involved in those applications moving forward. I'd be happy to answer or address any other questions if you have them. I'd also like to point out that in the audience today is the district attorney, if you have questions for him, as well as code enforcement from the RMA, if you have questions for them.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to address a couple of the legal type issues that were raised by the public. One question had to do with the operative date of the ordinances, and just to clarify, under state law, an ordinance becomes effective on the 31st day following adoption, but it is not, as proposed, it would not become operative unless the Board of Supervisors submits a tax to the voters and the voters adopt the tax, and then the operative date would be the date that the county elections official submits the certified statement of the results of the vote on the tax to the Board of Supervisors, and that's typically around 3 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks or so after the election. Number two, staff is planning on bringing a commercial cannabis tax measure to the Board of Supervisors in July, so that I think the intent is to bring that tax measure to hearing essentially on July 19th, at the same time that the board would be considering the ordinances you have before you. Per state law, the Title VII ordinance, as well as the commercial cannabis tax ordinance, will be introduced, or would be scheduled. We're thinking about introducing it, putting it on the board consent agenda for introduction on July 12th, but with the hearing scheduled on July 19th. So people want to give input on the tax measure. July 19th is the planned scheduled date for that. Third, questions were raised about the public disclosure of the personal medical cannabis permit pursuant to Chapter 7.95 that's being proposed. And that is something I'll probably need to research a bit, but under the Public Records Act, typically permit applications are public. However, there is an exemption to protect against invasion of personal privacy. But county is required to weigh the balance of public interest in disclosure versus public interest in withholding. And so the public, I think that there may be a redaction, for example, of private information like the name and the email address, but very likely part of the Chapter 7.95 information would be made public. I don't, so that is as long as it is consistent with HIPAA. So that is something that staff can look into between now and the Board of Supervisors, and have perhaps a little bit more specific answer to that. But I don't think that people should have an expectation that the entire thing would then be made confidential. The county has an obligation to weigh the public interest in disclosure against the public interest in non-disclosure. So unless disclosure is prohibited by law, they have to do that balancing test. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, staff, you want to add? That's it. Well, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Dale.
I'd like to start out very briefly, and then we can do some more in-depth work later. Firstly, this is a complicated issue. We're not given enough time to delve into in-depth any recommendations we may have for substantive changes to this resolution under the time frame that's allowed. So it's a little frustrating for me as a commissioner to not be given the time and opportunity to actually do the job that we're asked to do and engage with this proposed ordinance in a way that might be a little more analytical and a little more in-depth. It's simply not possible to do it in the course of a hearing with information that we received last Thursday. So I am troubled by the fact that the time taken has not included sufficient allowance for the process at this point. That feels to me a little as if what we have to say is not taken as seriously as it might be. So if I'm crabby, that kind of is an overpowering, overarching issue. Number two, I strongly oppose additional permitting for personal grows of any sort. I think that the public interest is not served by requiring patients who have a medical permit and are currently operating as defined by, under the obligations imposed under the state law. I think asking someone who is ill and who is benefiting from this personally in ways that go beyond the medical, I think there's an empowerment issue here as well, in handling their own care, dealing with their own symptoms for something that requires, that for which this medicine is useful. I think it's the exact opposite of the Compassionate Use Act's intent. So I will not support a recommendation that includes the provision for an annual personal medical cannabis permit for personal cultivation issued by the county as an administrative permit, and it's outlined in number 4 on page 5 of the proposed resolution that we would send to the board. Finally, for this round, I know there's going to be many insightful comments on the commission. Finally, I think the question of whether or not we're going to allow medical marijuana is answered already. We apparently have said, by proposing this ordinance, going through the public process thus far, that we intend to do so. That being the case, rather than add a whole another system of restrictions, I want to use the market to get this stuff under control, to make sure that the issues related to criminality are minimized. Prohibition has not done that. We've tried that. It doesn't work. I would like to have us use our existing use permit process, which will address adequately any environmental or other impacts that we wish to add for this particular issue, to allow people to apply for the opportunity to do this legally. If they wish to build a greenhouse, we have a process for that. I believe any agricultural zoning district is appropriate for that request. Any individual site may be inappropriate for that granting of that request. We don't know. Rather than having to make broad-based general decisions about those, I strongly suggest that we use the systems that we have now to go into the case-specific situations and decide what can be done. If we are only going to allow greenhouses, that comment would apply. My suggestion would be that it applies equally to outdoor growing. The sheriff's concern about enforcement strikes me again, as I said when I was speaking to him. Based on past experience, prohibitions don't help him as much as we might wish anyway. But apparently, we are not using all the technology that are available. Any use permit we grant can be put on GIS. Any individual wishing to know whether or not something is permitted can have that information immediately available. There seems to me to be no benefit to taking that as a separate issue rather than doing it through the existing processes, allowing it to be considered through the systems that we have in place in the areas that we believe are appropriate with it, and let the market solve the problem that we haven't been able to do with prohibition.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes, I fully support Commissioner Deal's remarks, and just want to say, I have a somewhat, I guess, emotional response to this issue. In 1990, my wife was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer, given about a 5% chance of survival. We took her to see the foremost expert in ovarian cancer in the country. He got her into an experimental program of very aggressive chemotherapy that was hoped to be effective. But the biggest problem was that most people who entered that program were unable to complete the 6 months of chemotherapy because they would become so nauseated and so sick that they would lose weight to the point where the chemotherapy would have to be suspended and they'd end up dying of the cancer. This doctor, the foremost, not some fly-by-night guy handing out cards, but this doctor back in 1990, before there was any such thing as medical marijuana, he prescribed us a whole pharmacopoeia of anti-nausea drugs to help with that, including Marinol. But he explained to us that none of those drugs were as effective for his patients as smoked marijuana. And he advised us that we should illegally obtain marijuana and that she should smoke it if she wanted to save her life. That is what she did. We tried all the drugs, injectable, pills, none of them, just as the doctor had suggested to us, turned out to be as effective as the smoked marijuana. She was able to maintain her weight during that 6 months of very aggressive chemotherapy, which left her with, probably many lifelong issues, but she did survive the cancer and remains alive today. So, to me, it is not, it's not a matter of, to me, it's not a quality of life issue, it's an issue of actually surviving certain diseases, such as happened, in my own experience. So, it's certainly not an effective argument with me to argue that, smoked marijuana is, an unproven or, we don't know enough about it. People shouldn't be allowed to smoke it. And I frankly don't care if people, when people say, oh, well, it's people claiming to be in pain, a lot of people are genuinely in pain. And even if there are some people who are faking pain in order to get it, I frankly don't care. I would rather that the people who are in pain and that it does help get what they need to help them, even at the cost of a few people smoking some marijuana for fun. I don't care. And so, I have this sort of strong, because of my personal experience, reaction to that kind of argument. So that's that. To me, when I look at what the opportunity that we have in front of us right now, we have an opportunity to get gangs and criminals, out of an industry that's been with us for a long time and which has been, to some extent, had a lot of involvement from gangs and criminals because it's an illegal industry. And my concern is that this ordinance is basically too restrictive to achieve that promise. And, as written, if it's passed as written, it's still simply going to perpetuate the situation that we've been living with for a long time, in which, this industry continues to enrich gangs and continues to, create criminal activity, when we have this golden opportunity to take it out of the shadows, to put it into the hands of legitimate operators, to cut out the gangs, to cut out the criminals, and make this a positive industry for everyone involved. So, and I guess the final thing I want to say about that is that the worst thing about this ordinance as written is that, as written, it will actually drive existing economically contributing legitimate businesses either underground or out of the county. And I cannot understand for the life of me why we would want to do that. I have sat through many, this has been a long session today, but I've sat through many more hours than we've sat through today listening to presentations on how to, achieve some kind of economic development in this county. And again, as Commissioner Deal said, this is not a question of whether we should do this or not. So we're going to do it. So why shouldn't we do it in the way that economically benefits the county? And, to put restrictions, what other industry are we going to limit? Well, obviously the permit limits are out of this, but, limit it to, only certain greenhouses in certain areas and not outdoor. It's incomprehensible to me. I do not understand why we'd want to do that, so I do not support in any way, shape, or form this ordinance as currently written. If we have to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors today, my recommendation is that some provision be made for, as Commissioner Deal said, for the usual use permit process to be followed to allow people to seek permits, for both outdoor and indoor growing. and that we remove the requirements for additional permits for people who are using it personally, for their own personal use, under the Compassionate Use Act, and that we strive to make this industry as successful as possible in Monterey County, to bring it out of the shadows, and to do things in an orderly fashion where the market decides what shape the industry will take. Thank you.
Commissioner Hazelwood.
Thank you, Jim. I can't support this either the way it's written, and my concerns, besides the emotional issues which were spoken to so eloquently by the two previous commissioners, my issues still go back to the land use issues, and I don't think we've gotten to a point yet. Well, I know for myself, I can't support the issue because I think we have not arrived at that consensus point yet on the way this thing is structured. I don't know if that's just that we need to go through each individual point more carefully, but the bottom line for me is that I just can't support this as written yet. I'm not saying that we can't get there, but I can't support it yet. So for those reasons, mainly land use issues, I can't support the document as written.
Any other commissioner? Commissioner Hurd?
I agree with everything I've heard from the commissioners today, and I would say let's turn this thing around and fix it. It looks like it's going to be passed, but let's pass it in the correct way, and I think we need to look at roads that are near residential properties. That's a big issue, and I don't want to get into what the lady was saying here because it goes pretty deep, and I think we need to look at that, okay? Let's get some language in there to protect people from what could possibly happen, and look at that. And I would like to move forward with this after it's properly fixed. Right now, it's just not ready for prime time. Thank you.
Commissioner Humphries.
Through the chair, I want to piggyback on the last comment, and we need to look at the at this with the public health lens and look at short and long term effects that it's going to have in the population. So that's something our health department can help with, and I feel like it needs to be added to this ordinance.
Any other commissioner? Commissioner Mendez.
Yeah, I just, well, for one, I appreciate Commissioner Vanderveer's comment. There is a lot of people out there in need, you know, and I just don't understand why is it that we want to limit this to, you know, we want to just stringent this regulation more than what it is. My issue from the very beginning has been, why is it that we're just going to open it up to existing greenhouses? I really don't get that. I really don't get that at all. And you know, if we're going to pass this ordinance, we should just allow anyone that's compliant or whatever that could prove that he or she you know, could actually get a use permit, you know, allow it regardless whether they have a greenhouse or not, you know. So you know, from what I heard so far from all the other commissioners, I don't think this, the way it's written right now, is ready to be moved on. So what I suggest is, and you know, I would like to hear from other commissioners, is maybe we need a continuance on this item and come back with it, with some language that we could all accept. Thank you.
Any other commissioner?
I too cannot support the way it's written. There's a lot of unintended consequences. For example, the no more greenhouses when hydroponics are becoming more and more efficient in produce. Just little things like that. So I'm wondering, how do we, given the deadlines, that's a problem, but how do we go forward? I mean, can we, as a commission, go point by point through some of this, or how do we do that?
Mr. Holmes?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. I'm in hearing that the Planning Commission is concerns and the understanding from the board's ad hoc committee as far as the timing for wanting to bring this forward. A potential solution would be that we do have some direction from the commission. If there's additional direction, we can take that. We can revise the resolution and take the resolution forward to the Board of Supervisors with the Planning Commission's comments and suggestions with the ordinances as the ad hoc committee has drafted them. They can make the choice to, if they want to defer it, to make those changes and come back to the Planning Commission, or how they would like to move forward with that. And maybe, Council, if you want to expand on that.
Right, so procedurally, the Planning Commission, for example, today could adopt a motion providing direction to staff with what you want your recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to be, and then continue the hearing to next week. And then staff could bring back the resolution with the sense of the commission per your direction. That is one option.
Okay, thank you. So,
I think you do need to make a written recommendation to the Board of Supervisors per planning and zoning law on Title 21 and 20. So I do recommend that if you are not inclined to adopt the resolution that staff presented in the staff report, that we do continue the hearing to next week in order for staff to bring you back a resolution that captures the sense of the commission. And we'd be looking for a motion from the commissioners as to what that, what the direction would be to, and then you'd still have an opportunity to vote on the resolution next week.
okay, so before we go to that point, I'll say a couple of things myself. So obviously, it is too restricted in my opinion. There's no question that it has medical benefits on marijuana. That goes back even to my country, back in Mexico. They used marijuana even in those days to treat arthritis and many different things. So there's no question about it. This is long history. But how can we let the legal growers do it? The illegal growers are going to continue. But if you can control the ones that really grow it legally, and they're on record, then the law enforcement will know exactly who does and who doesn't. I know you worked long hours on this ordinance, and you did an excellent job. And it takes a lot of time when you try to address everything you can possibly think of. But it is a little too restrictive. So if you can work on that, I know probably the recommendation from the commission will be probably that with the continuance will probably going to be recommended. So we open up for a motion.
Through the chair, if we can just get a couple of points of clarification. There are various, and Commissioner Duflo said, should we go through item by item? Is the main issue cultivation? That's the question, is the restriction cultivation? That's what we're hearing. We just want to make sure that we're clear, because we have dispensaries, we have other items. It sounds like it's mainly the concern is cultivation, so just requesting a point of clarification from the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Hurd?
We had some people come up. We had some persons come up discussing that they want to expand their current business. What about them? Okay, taxes, are they reasonable? What are the taxes going to be? Let's talk about that in real time to try to get a feel for it. Okay, reasonable taxes. Multiple permits per parcel to increase efficiency.
Commissioner Hazelwood?
Just
Thank you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Hurd is not quite done. Would you what your thought, Commissioner Hurd?
I'm not through yet. Just a second. Lynn Sousa, I think, was up. and she discussed that she needed a pathway. She was looking for a pathway to allow her to do personal growth through the ordinance for, not personal growth, but continue a small cottage business, I believe it was, through this ordinance. There was a discussion about unlimited issuance of permits may be a mistake, and under what circumstances, I don't know. Maybe that's commercial permits, too many. And the same person talked about enforcement should be more restrictive. Well, with the staffing that we have, the enforcement is going to be tough for the sheriff's department. So I don't see it getting much more restrictive unless we got a SWAT team going out to clean up something in the forest, being realistic. And Heidi Park was the lady that talked about no room for cottage industries or existing cottage industries. Is there a possibility that we could be more inclusive for them? We're going to have this. And what about the absence of possibilities for people to grow in South County? I was ill when this came out, when this was worked on, but when I first got the package, that was the first thing I could see as I read through it, that these people are left out, what people are left out. So we need to be more inclusive. So that's about it. That helps.
Commissioner Hassan?
Yeah, thank you. My impression of the commission at this point is that we would, I think, without contradiction from fellow commissioners, we would like to use the suggestion that County Council put forward that we write, that we not move it on as written, but to give them our thoughts in a letter. Was that it? In a resolution. But in order to do that, I'd like to take a little more time, and we're getting close to lunch. So my suggestion would be that we break for lunch and come back and get the input from each commissioner and try to resolve as best we can what needs to go into the resolution, and then, as County Council suggested, give staff till next week to put that together and come back and attach that resolution to the ordinance.
Is that on the mic? Did I hear something on the microphone there from the? Well, it's not, that was more of a suggestion to recess for lunch and then come back so we can, without being hungry, go through what you would like the resolution to say.
Okay, Mr. Hasselman,
that is exactly, once again, County Council is doing perfectly, I mean, mirroring my thoughts perfectly.
That was your intent, okay, so, and that was the second?
You can recess for lunch, Chair, if that's the consensus, without a motion to recess for lunch.
Okay, oh, that would be a consensus.
We could do some work before lunch yet. I don't think we're going to pass out. We could use our 20 minutes, I think.
Speak for yourself, Commissioner.
Okay, Commissioner members, you wanted to say something? No? Okay. So, I think we can use that 20 minutes for lunch and I give you more time. No, like at 1:30. 1:30. Okay, what is consensus? 1 o'clock is good enough for everyone? Okay, so why don't we just make it at 1:30, make sure there's no conflict in time. So we'll be back at 1:30.
Thank you. Okay, I got to run to a lots and jobs, but this is what I'm going to.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Monterey County Planning Commission is back in session. Let the record show, I think Commissioner Hesselman is here somewhere, so for not, right now he's not back, but we still have everyone that was here this morning is back. And I believe we left off with the staff. Are we ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon now, Commissioners. Craig Spencer again with the Resource Management Agency, still here with Jacqueline Anciano, also with the RMA. We had taken a break and are now back to discuss the specifics of the recommendation of the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors. And in doing so, I'd like to take direction from the Commission regarding how you would like to go through the issues and whether or not you want to make in-depth recommendations on what should be changed to the ordinance, the zoning districts in which you think the cannabis operations should be allowed, with what type of permit, or whether you want to make it more general than that.
If I may, through the chair, as I understood it at our break, the commission was going to give us direction through a resolution, and that the resolution then would go forward to the Board of Supervisors. So we are open to hear how the Planning Commission would like to move forward on that.
Very good. And then we'll start with Commissioner Dill.
Thank you. I think Ms. Anciano has done a good job of explaining that. I think.
Am I interrupt for a second? Commissioner Hesselman is officially here.
Commissioner Getzelman's back in the building. I think she has done an excellent job of explaining what I understand our next goal to be, which is to create a new resolution from the Planning Commission providing a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Will go forward as they consider any ordinances that they may choose to consider. Obviously, that's not binding, but it does keep us on the timeline and allow us to say what we think needs to be said in the hope that it might get a little more airplay. Again, I decry the time pressure on something this important. I can say from experience we have spent more time and gone back and forth more on lighting and landscape than we have on something of this import, and I find that troubling. But that being said, because I'm going to propose some things which are to some extent a change in approach rather than a change in wording, I have a list of items I'd like to read through, and there are quite a few of them if the Commissioner is okay with me doing that. I think I can do it relatively efficiently, but I just want to read through my thoughts, which I wrote down so I could try to keep from wandering too terribly. Mr. Chair, is that okay?
Yes, Commissioner, go ahead.
Okay. Number one, remove any additional requirement for annual permitting for personal medical grows, cite compassion and privacy issues. Number two, simplify regulations and ordinances at all possible points. Use existing systems rather than making up new ones. The one in question is the use permit process, which is a very rigorous and comprehensive process. Number three, allow anyone in any agricultural, including conservation agricultural zoning district, to apply for a use permit to grow medical marijuana. Provide outcomes-based specific requirements for all such applications, including items that are specific to this crop. For example, you might require a security plan approved by the Monterey County Sheriff's Department. You might require setbacks from residences and schools, same way that we require drainage plans required approved by the Water Resources Department. And all of those added provisions should be funded by the applicant in the form of fees rather than taxes. All other provisions for use permit applications, including everything listed in CEQA, would still apply, including environmental resource protections, viewshed issues, conversion of uncultivated lands, and any cumulative impacts that may be imposed by said particular application. Number four, state clearly in the recommendation that medical marijuana is not a routine and ongoing agricultural use. Number five, state clearly that growing or processing medical marijuana is not a coastal dependent use. Number 6, set permit fees and conditions so that additional processing, such as I discussed before, fees for any additional plans like a security plan review, are paid for by the applicant at cost, and similarly to an EIR. Number 7, include a permit fee to cover GIS mapping of all use permits granted related to medical marijuana and programming sufficient to make this information readily available and accessible to law enforcement and code enforcement personnel. Number 8, review requirements for greenhouse gases in the existing ordinance in the light of the above. The use permit process can and does address this now. Number 9, consider allowing low-impact cottage industry permits for non-volatile processing of medical marijuana products. Number 10, explain and project the process to address changes that would be in response to changes in state and federal law in a way that so that people who are moving forward now have some idea what might happen if such changes were to occur. My thought here is to provide some kind of support for those who do make the brave step of coming forward and trying to become legal. Number 11, reference general plan expression of support and promotion of value-added agricultural operations in the discussion of general plan consistency. Number 12, remove the discussion suggesting that medical marijuana is not an agricultural product. And these are sort of more general points, and there's a few of them. We've already tried prohibition, and we've tried the state law provisions for 2 years now. Neither seems to have provided response to our concerns. The last 2 years, I've observed a reduction in some of the pressures for illegal growing in the backcountry. This makes me hopeful, but I want to harness this approach with a program in these ordinances that will be big enough to allow market forces to remove the pressure for criminals to be the people who control and benefit from this industry. People are standing in line to be legal, and I think that that should have some bearing on how this ordinance comes out. I'd like the recommendation to have a strong statement of compassion for patients, and that this should be a governing priority of any regulation that implements the Compassionate Care Act, or whatever, compassionate, yeah, anyway. I shouldn't use abbreviations. Evidence of existing operations that have not caused problems should be considered relevant under the CEQA analysis for the use permit. An equal and even-handed approach to opportunity should be important in all of our ordinances, certainly equally important with supporting things like adaptive reuse of greenhouses, which I think is a splendid idea as well, but it's not the only benefit we can have here. And then just a note to clarify the question of multiple permits per parcel so that everybody knows exactly what's meant by it.
That's it?
That's all I came up with.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dale. Anyone else in the commission? Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes, I fully support the points that Commissioner Dale has just made. I hope we can make that, the basis for our recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. There's just a couple of other things that I'd like to touch on. One of which is the requirement of the background checks. And I understand this may be something that's going to be required by state law or is required by state law. But to the extent that it isn't, I think we should think carefully about it. I mean, I don't think there's any compelling reason why someone, just because they have, a felony conviction for theft or something in the past 10 years or whatever it is that disqualifies people, shouldn't be allowed to get a job spraying fertilizer on a crop. So I know that it's we have a problem with reintegrating people into society who've been convicted of felonies, things like that. And I think making that process harder for them is in general bad public policy unless there's some compelling reason why they should be excluded from a certain type of employment. So I think I'm hoping we can take a look at what's possible in that area. Also, and I think Commissioner Deal may have touched on this, but the whole issue of the security rules that we, and we're getting pretty specific in the current draft about, things people have to do in terms of security. And I think it's important to remember that nobody cares more about security than the people that are running these operations. I mean, as much as we may care about it, it's their money and their resource. They're going to care about it even more than we do. And I don't think the sort of one-size-fits-all approach that we get when we specify exactly what people have to do is the best way to do it. I mean, I think it would be better. I think what Commissioner Deal mentioned, saying you must have a security plan that's signed off on by the sheriff, something along those lines is a far better approach than saying everyone must have a fence that's this tall or must do this or the other, and then at the same time saying, well, but nobody can carry a gun. Instead of having those kind of rules that are almost sort of contradictory in some ways, it's, some operate, the security needs of different locations and different operations may be very different, and I think we should have the flexibility to address them on a case-by-case basis. But other than that, I just fully associate myself with the remarks of Commissioner Deal and hope we can move in that direction.
Any other commissioner? Anyone else wishes to speak? Commissioner Hazelman?
Thank you, Chairman Padilla. I think that my feeling is that Commissioner Deal's list was exhaustive and certainly much better thought out than anything I could have put together over lunch. I would only say that my input for the recommendation going forward would just be that we need to, fairness is an important thing to me, and I just don't believe that the way this ordinance is written, it is necessarily fair to everyone. And so if I were to encourage the Board of Supervisors, I would encourage them to consider the fairness issues, especially to the people who have with their current businesses, those that have entered into it with all of the state regulations or whatever, and are permitted and are currently doing business. I think it's unfair to them, certainly, to do anything that would restrict their ability to make a living. That's aside from all of the issues about cannabis in general and the health benefits that it has, which I agree with too. But I believe our purpose is to limit ourselves to the land use issues. So if we can, I would encourage the Board of Supervisors to consider a more inclusive land use policy for the growing of marijuana and to encourage, as Commissioner Vanderveer pointed out, to encourage that kind of business in the county. I think we need that. So those are my thoughts on the subject.
Commissioner Bendis?
Thank you, Chair. I believe to Commissioner Getzman's concern, I believe that it was bullet number 3 on Commissioner Deal's list that actually addressed Commissioner Getzman's concern.
Commissioner Deal, do you mind repeating that third one?
Can't believe anybody wants to hear more from me now. That's cool. Give me a microphone. Yes, my third point was that that our recommendation should be to allow anyone in any agricultural zoning district, specifically including conservation agricultural like WSC, to apply for a use permit to grow medical marijuana. So what that would do is would allow each of these cases to come forward for a use permit in the same way that any other application would come through for a use permit, and that would address the ability of anybody anywhere that agricultural operations would normally occur to ask. Now, that might not allow such a person to receive a permit. There might be specific reasons why not, but it would certainly provide a fairer and more level platform for people who wished to make the request and go through the process.
Thank you. Any other commissioner? Seeing none, we'll County Council, excuse me, Commissioner Dufek.
Can I ask what Commissioner Deal's point 4 was? I don't know if I understood that.
State clearly that medical marijuana is not a routine and ongoing agricultural operation. So, in other words, where we have in the general plan a series of provisions allowing that refer to routine and ongoing agricultural operations that are not subject to various SEQA review provisions, like putting up a new fence or some kinds of crop changes. What I want to do here is to head that off and say, in this case, we have special concerns and it's not routine and ongoing and it would require a use permit, even though other kinds of operations don't. It was my intent that would provide some clarity and separation and avoid that issue coming back in the future.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. And there's only one thing I wanted to point out was that if you have multiple operations on one property, that the state law, the way it's written, it says regulations in the future may limit the ability to have multiple operations on one property. So do we want to avoid having a problem in the future by not putting that in?
County Council.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's in your discretion what you want to say about that. But in regard to the technical question, I just want to make a couple comments. I mean, part of it is Title 20 and 21 are land use, and the use permit is granted to the owner. State law has a licensing scheme that's going to issue licenses to the licensee, who isn't necessarily the owner. So the question that's very ambiguous right now, that for which the state has said they haven't drafted the regulations, so they don't have the answer, is, can there be multiple licensees, for example, on the same property? And the state law uses the term premises and doesn't define premises. So it's unclear if that's a parcel or what a premise is. And in thinking about this ordinance, and this is just an explanation about why really your recommendation, you must make a recommendation regarding the zoning, which is the use permit side. The Title VII is really more about the operator, who might not be the property owner. An owner might be able to lease to 5 different licensees. And so all 5 of those operations would have to come in and get a state license, and they'd have to come in and get the commercial medical cannabis permit from the county under Title VII. So the Title VII ordinances mirror more the operator side. So when we talk about multiple permits on one lot, I think the concept is, and looking to planning, is that we would allow these multiple licenses on one property if state law allows it. And what we don't quite know what state law is going to allow because the state regulations have not been written.
Mr. Chair?
Can I have Mr. Holmes first, and then Mr. Holmes?
I wanted directly to respond to one point council just made, if I might.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is that in practice, use permits are not necessarily only granted to property owners. They are granted to lessees, having just been through that process. I know that this is the case, and agricultural lessees are certainly been separately treated from owners as well. There is a prohibition, as I understand, under the Subdivision Map Act for properties to be subdivided beyond the boundaries that might apply regardless of what you can't lease parts of parcels for different uses on a given parcel without subdividing, as I understand it, or something of that nature. But I can speak from experience that the lessee can be the applicant, and we saw that in some of the oil exploration processes as well. So there must be some way to do that.
I'd like to respond to that. Okay, because yes, we've had situations, for example, wireless communications, where our applicant is AT&T, for example, but the owner is the rancher or somebody who owns a big piece of property. But the use permit, I've ended up having to give this a great deal of thought, especially in regard to this state and what we're trying to do here, is even in a situation where like a wireless, situation, take it out of the marijuana situation. The use permit still runs with the land, so to some degree, we also need to keep the owner responsible. The owner has some, because in the end, if the owner wants to make a private arrangement with the lessee to say that the owner is only going to lease this land for 100 years for the cell tower, that's a private matter for the owner. But when the county's issuing that use permit and it says you can have a cell tower here for 100 years, that owner, it isn't specific to the operator, it's specific to the owner, unless the permit's conditioned to be very explicit that it's only for the particular operator, and when that particular operator ceases, the use permit terminates. So in this case, I think the way that staff presented these regulations, at least, to get it out of the academic kind of discussion, is there'll be a use permit issued to the owner, this was the proposal, and the operator, in essence, has to come in and get the commercial medical cannabis yearly permit. That's the Title VII. And there were two parts to Title VII, 790 and 795. The part that's the personal sort of registration requirement, 795. And there's a clear recommendation from the Planning Commission from what you've said to delete 7.95. It still leaves 7.90, which is the yearly operator requirement, which is really mirrors much more closely the licensing scheme that's in state law. The use permit is our gloss to say which parts of the county do we want to have this use in what zoning districts, and what uses do we want to allow in those uses. And we've tried to integrate the two by saying that if you have, the use permit is insufficient, the operator also needs to get the commercial medical cannabis, and likewise, if you're going to get a commercial medical cannabis permit, the owner has to consent to that. So that's how the two have been written to integrate with each other.
Okay, but before I get to the next commissioner, I know we're getting too many technicals here right now.
I can solve this problem.
Okay, you will in a second. But we have to move along, obviously. But so, Commissioner Joe, please. I know we're going back and forth with the county council. We can
because a use permit can be limited by time, and has been. We had those with auto wrecking yards. These are things that can be done in a use permit that prevent the issues that council was raising from being so overwhelming. And I still think it's an existing process that can be used to do what we want to do rather than inventing something new, which, to my mind, is a whole lot more infrastructure.
I don't know what's going back and forth now. Mr. Holmes.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So kind of going back to Commissioner Duflock, but also Commissioner Deal's comments. So the way the process would be for us is the use permit goes with the land. There's also cases where there's commercial or industrial properties, if they're over an acre, would require a general development plan, would also require that piece to identify if this type of use is included in that operation. But the use permit, whether it be applied for by a leasee, that application still needs to be signed by the property owner because they're ultimately responsible for the conditions on that. And as Commissioner Deal mentioned, it has been a practice that some use permits are conditioned with a specific time to come back where they need to be reviewed, renewed, and addressed. And the issue, though, relative to the multiple uses is the use permit would frame the capacity of that permit. And it might be 25,000 square feet, whatever that is. Now, that would be up to the owner at that point, or whoever is in control of that. It might be five 4,000 square foot operators or one single operator. And so we were trying to get away from that in our ordinance because of not knowing exactly where the state was going to end up on that. If for some reason the ordinances that we adopt end up in conflict with where the state ends up with their regulations, we would need to come back and do an amendment to make sure that our ordinances are consistent with the state law. We wouldn't be able to have something to the contrary. But at this point, there isn't that, so I think the commission, you do have the flexibility to identify what you would like for it to be. That would be the case until the state law goes into effect. Now, that may have an effect on some of the operators if they are operating in a manner that would end up inconsistent with the state law.
Why don't we go to staff right now, and if you have any questions, I know we can still come back to the commission, so do you have any questions? Are you
Yes,
have
thank
the
you,
idea of what the commission is working towards?
I have
Yes,
written down
you
the
do.
list. Yes, I've written down the list that Commissioner Deal provided, and I may have to go back and review the tape to make sure I have it correct. But I did have one point of clarification I would like to ask about, and that was relative to, I believe it was item number 3, allowing anyone in an agricultural zoning district to make an application. And what I have on the screen here is a list of the zoning districts from our zoning code. And they were previously arranged this way by residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and conservation zonings, based on a review of the purpose written in the zoning district. But right now what we have under the agricultural heading is farmland, permanent grazing, rural grazing, coastal agricultural preserve, and that would be in the coastal zone, as well as agricultural conservation zoning district in the coastal zone. I believe Commissioner Deal mentioned in a second comment the watershed and scenic conservation zone, which is on the conservation side. So trying to understand the direction relative to where those use permits would be accepted in which zoning districts, or whether it would be all of the zoning districts and driven purely by the use permit.
Mr. Chair?
Let them finish first of all, then go ahead and finish.
I think this is a point a clarification. I can address what I meant. I don't know what the commission was.
Okay, go ahead.
I can't speak to rural conservation or open space. I haven't studied those as much, but I've spent a great deal of time engaging with watershed and scenic conservation through the Big Sur land use plan process over the years. It is stated in numerous documents, this is an agricultural zoning district. Agricultural uses are encouraged. It's in the text. And that is why I consider that to be an agricultural use. I don't know whether rural conservation carries the same kind of weight. I don't believe it does, and I don't believe open space does. But I can't be as sure. I'm dead sure on watershed and scenic conservation because we've used that in so many ways before, and that's why I specifically reference it. It may be that in the code part that you read, it didn't say that, but in the text discussing the use of it, it very clearly does. My provision was meant to be all of the uses listed under agriculture and watershed scenic conservation. That would be my proposal.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, staff?
Not at this time. Thank you, through the chair.
I have one.
All right. Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, I do have one other question for Commissioner Deal. And I think I heard you say that it is not a coastal dependent use. Is that in response to the Coastal Commission's letter? Is that what that was to address?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
County Council?
And so does staff have direction in regard to dispensaries, transportation, delivery, and manufacturing, and testing?
Yeah, thank you, Council. Staff, my understanding is not much of the discussion has been geared towards cultivation of cannabis. As I think I mentioned early in my presentation this morning, there are a number of different license types that are part of the chain of custody of the new cannabis business. Those would include not only cultivation, but manufacturing, distribution and transportation, testing, and dispensaries. I can go back to my slide regarding where those zoning districts would allow it, but essentially what we had done for those is identify uses of a similar character to those that are already in the zoning code. So distribution facilities are allowed in industrial zones with a use permit in most cases, and what we have done is add distribution of cannabis to that zone as well. but not to other zones. So if there's a desire to review those other types of activities outside of cultivation, we'd be happy to hear the feedback on that.
And if I may, through the chair, one question we do have for clarification was relative to the cottage industry. You brought up us looking at the cottage industry, low-impact uses, I think was the terminology that you used. And so currently, we allow cottage industries, and there's a use permit that is required that comes back in various stages. Are you considering, based on one of the speakers, that this particular type of, is it tied to a personal grow, or what was the idea, through the chair, on the cottage industry?
Commissioner Dillon.
Through the chair, I'm not sure I got the words right. Lunch wasn't all that long because I actually ate lunch. My intent was more of on-site agricultural processing, I guess, if that frames it better. If someone is growing the product under their license and wishes to refine it into some product that uses a salve or something that they can do on site without causing a problem, I'd like to see a provision for the use permit to include that opportunity for them. I guess cottage industry may not be, with the small letters was more what I had in mind than the cottage industry provisions under the code, which I don't think are quite applicable for this. But my intent was the other, maybe on-site agricultural processing kind of classifies it better. That was what I was thinking, anyway.
Okay, before I go to any other commissioner, I know we're getting a little, I don't quite understand if everyone understands what Commissioner Deal is proposing. I'm trying to grasp all the recommendations that she has. My concern is this, with your original proposal, if some of this became part of your proposal, that's going to trigger other changes they have to work on. Is it going to? It's going to be a domino effect. It's going to affect something down the line. So it isn't just changing it. It's going to affect something else. So
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. It will definitely change in various areas, and we'll have to look at that very carefully. But this is the recommendation from the Planning Commission in resolution form. So when we take this to the Board of Supervisors, we'll be taking the resolution as outlined if that's the agreement from the commission with these issues. As I understand it, now look at the secretary if I'm incorrect, we're still taking the ordinance as it exists forward to the Board of Supervisors, but this resolution with these recommendations would be attached to that, and we would speak to the issues that have been raised. We would not at this time, unless it's the direction of the commission, be changing our ordinance as it exists right now, but we'll make it clear that Title 7.95 was recommended as to be deleted and so forth. Is that correct, Mr. Holm?
Mr. Chair, if I may, and council can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was understanding was that the resolution would basically be that the Planning Commission is not recommending the ordinances as they've been drafted, and rather than us trying to amend those ordinances at this point, the resolution would outline what the Planning Commission would want to see adjusted, and if the board so chooses, they could remand it back with those changes to be done that then could be considered in a follow-up venue.
Correct.
okay, Commissioner Hasselman?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Holm. That's exactly my intent at any rate. I can't speak for the rest of the board. I just wanted to tell staff that I certainly appreciate all the hard work that went into this, and I hope that you don't feel that at least my input in any way was critical of the terrific job that you did. I know that you were given some guidelines by others, and it structured the way you went after this ordinance, and I certainly understand that. And if it were not for the deadline that we're all up against that Commissioner Deal has referred to, I would be more than in favor of hashing this out until we finally get it right. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury, and so I think we just need to move forward as was described by Mr. Holm and by County Council, and give the Board of Supervisors a chance to take a whack at this one under the time frame that we've been given. Thank you.
Commissioner Mendes.
Yeah, I believe there's one more item that should be discussed, at least for me, I believe it's very important, and Mr. Holmes was the one that brought it up, and that was the amount of lessees, whatever, that could work under the use permit. So I think that should be discussed. Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Deal.
I put this in terms in my mind of the way some farmers operate, where we have a number of smaller operators who use parts of their field for different specific uses. They may grow something for a restaurant over here, and the boutique guys do, and something for themselves over there, and some other product under contract to somebody else in third place. I don't think this is out of the experience of commercial agriculture in the county now, and I suspect that if we go back to that as a source of how to manage it, that there'll be a lot of wisdom there to manage appropriately. The testimony we heard was that allowing multiple lessees was something that was desirable for the speaker in terms of efficient use of space. And since this is such a high-value, low-volume product, I can see that that might be very much the case. So, I mean, again, one of my points was to at least mention how we're going to proceed should state law change and some of our provisions be proven to be incompatible. I mean, just to state in the letter that we need to have a good, clear understanding of that. But I would reference the existing agricultural world and say, I think there's a way to do this that could allow multiple permits and multiple efforts on a single piece of property without chaos. I could be wrong, but I think it's true.
Thank you. Now, the next steps, of course, I'm not too sure if everybody quite understands what the proposal is. It was read on the record. I want to make sure everybody understands what we're recommending. Is that when I have any questions, I know we could go back and forth with Commissioner Deal, since she's the one that made the proposals, but does anyone else have any questions on the proposals?
Mr. Chair, I would add that if we continue it, they'll come back with a written recommendation for the Planning Commission to review at their leisure before our next meeting of the resolution, and then everyone will have yet another opportunity to see if that was what they meant.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may, that could be any form of call it a resolution of intent, and then staff will draft the resolution as we believe that we've captured it here today for the commission to look at. You can fine tune it, correct, however, if we got anything wrong, and then we can take that forward to the Board of Supervisors.
My concern, of course, is the time factor. I wish we had more time on this. We need several more minutes to really try to get it right anyway. It is sad that we have a timeline on this, in a very short timeline, where we spend more time in lighting and on some other issues than we do something that's completely different. We've never had this before. We had the stigma of marijuana. Everybody used to run to the hills. Marijuana, wow, it's an illegal drug. Now we're coming into it being illegal, medical purposes, and I, for one, obviously don't feel 100% comfortable. I reviewed the draft where Commissioner Deal proposed, and more issues probably come out after that. But unfortunately, like other commissioners said, we don't have that luxury. So the next step will have to be to continue to our next meeting. Does that take a motion?
It sounds like the appropriate motion would be motion of intent to make the recommendations as outlined by Commissioner Deal and continue the hearing to next Wednesday, which is June 29th. And then I heard a motion from Commissioner Vander.
Second by Commissioner Hurd.
And that would include suggestions from others as well as me, I hope.
Well, yeah.
My motion includes my own suggestions.
Okay. Right. Well, so, right. And then I would request that if Commissioner Deal could hand her notes to staff or to, that would help, because it was too much to write down all at once for at least the secretary and the clerk of the commission. That would be very good.
So when are we coming back?
Is there any further discussion on the continuance? No? So the motion is to continue to a day certain, which will be next week, next Wednesday, the 29th of June.
And also include these recommendations of the commission.
And so it includes, are there any other recommendations that we missed? No, I don't think so. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
You don't have to say.